Um, Annette, should I start?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, I will start. Welcome, everybody, to the 9th joint UNESCO-UNICEF-World Bank Webinar series on reopening schools. Webinar number 9 is focused on learning assessments and school reopening. We will hear today from experts from 3 institutions, as well as specialists working in national assessment agencies in Chile, Kenya, and the Republic of Korea. On behalf of the World Bank, I want to thank everybody, and especially our panelists, for being here today to share with us their experience of their countries and how they have been coping with the pandemic and how they have been thinking about planning and implementing assessments as students go back to school. The agenda for today begins with some opening remarks by Jaime Saavedra, Global Director of Education at the World Bank. After that, we will announce a new guidance note developed by the World Bank Learning Assessment Platform team on learning assessment and school reopenings. We will proceed after that to hear from the 3 experts of the national assessment agencies: Dr. Daniel Rodriguez from Chile, Dr. Assumpta Matei from Kenya, Dr. Kyungsung Chang from Republic of Korea, about the assessment initiatives and experiences that their countries have been implementing during the ongoing pandemic. After that, we are going to have a discussion session and a Q&A session led by Manuel Cardoso, Education Specialist of UNICEF. And we're going to close the event with some final remarks from Savita Will, Director of Future of Learning and Innovation at UNESCO. Just as a reminder to everybody, please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. Members of the audience can pose questions to the panelists and to everybody here through the chat box. Our colleagues will be collecting the questions and pose them to the panelists during the Q&A session. And there is live translation into French and Spanish for those of you connected through Zoom. Those of you connected through YouTube are only able to listen to the conversation in English. With no further delay, please allow me to introduce Jaime Saavedra, our Global Director of Education at the World Bank, who will be providing some opening remarks about this relevant topic. Over to you, Jaime.
Thank you very much, Diego, and thanks to the whole UNESCO, UNICEF, and World Bank team for organizing this series of events to discuss this complex and protracted process of reopening schools. And thank you very much to our colleagues of Chile, Kenya, and Korea for their sharing of experiences. I just wanted to emphasize the urgency of the moment, right? We're living the worst education crisis of the last 100 years. We've never lived something like this, in which you have extended school closures and, in addition, huge strain on public budgets and family budgets due to the worst recession of the last 100 years. So this is an immense shock on education. And despite the efforts that all countries have implemented during the last few months in terms of bringing in different types of multi-platform remote learning initiatives, we have to be conscious that there are learning losses. All these attempts will never replace presential education. There's a lot that we'll be able to learn, right, about how to use better digital tools and how to improve resiliency in terms of the continuity of the education process between the school and home. So a lot of lessons from this pandemic, but nothing that we have done will actually replace or is replacing presential education. So the magnitudes of the losses from the data, the data that we're seeing is very large, and it's very unequal. So the challenges that we face are immense. And during these months, many countries are trying to start to open. It's not an easy process. I mean, New York City just closed yesterday. Pakistan is closing nationwide in the coming days. It's closing back again. So this is, we're going to be facing a very complex process in the coming months, in which we'll need to learn to live with this virus. But at the same time, there is urgency to make sure that children could have as much as possible a presential experience. That's not going to be easy, but we need to try, or we need to improve the quality of our remote learning attempts. In that context, investing in assessing what is happening with learning of our children, how much they have lost during these last few months, is absolutely critical in order to be able to design better what we'll need to do, not in the coming years, it's what we need to do in the coming weeks and months, right, in order to try to compensate for these losses. So the work that many teams are already doing in terms of how to be creative and innovative in order to assess learning in ways that probably we have done in a very different ways of what we have done in the past is critical. So this discussion and learning from current experiences is extremely important. We need to try different things. We need to be able also to be willing to make mistakes, because there's no manual on how to deal with the pandemic. We are writing the manual as we speak. So thank you very much to everyone for participating in this discussion. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that we'll need to continue learning during the coming weeks and months. So thanks to everyone for participating, and over to you, Diego, for starting the discussion, please.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Before we proceed with the participation of our panelists, I want to briefly announce a new guidance note produced by the World Bank Learning Assessment Platform team. This team is led by my colleagues Julia Lieberman and Victoria Levin, and with myself, we have produced a new guidance note that is being released today on using learning assessments on the process of school reopening. Just reiterating what Jaime just said and echoing on this important issue, at the peak of the pandemic and the school closure in March of 2020, 1.6 billion students were out of school. But even nowadays, we're seeing that more than 40% of the students all over the world are still not able to go back to the classroom. This will have an impact, and this has been observed and simulated by the World Bank in terms of learning losses. But in the long term, it's going to have an impact also on earning and income that these students are going to be facing. This has to make the case for countries as they are considering when and how they have to reopen. As countries and stakeholders are having these conversations about how to reopen schools, there are 2 or 3 very key questions that they are asking themselves. The first one is, what do the students know and what they are able to do when they return to the classroom? Are they going to be ready to learn as expected, or they will need additional supports? Are the students catching up with the pre-COVID learning trajectory they were supposed to reach had COVID not happened? These are very important questions. And in order to answer them, they need to use learning assessments. Having those questions in mind, our team decided to create this guidance note. And this is part of a broader policy package of guidance that for school reopening that policymakers and other stakeholders have to keep in mind and have to consider as they are planning the school reopening in their countries. The note provides detailed guidance on different types of learning assessments, classroom assessments, large-scale assessments, examinations, that can be used to support learning and learning recovery. The note also puts some consideration on the resources that are needed to implement these assessments, whether these are financial resources, human technical resources in national assessment agencies, or time until reopening. We also cover some key steps in the process of implementing an assessment, whether this is a classroom assessment or large-scale assessment. What are some of the key messages that we want to deliver on this note? First and foremost, I think the key message here is that learning assessment put the focus back on learning as the students go back to the school. The priority is to ensure that all students come back to school, especially those that are most disadvantaged. And when they come back, we have to ensure that they are able to readjust and that they are at the social-emotional level to go back and learn. Once that all that is covered, then we have to be sure and we need to know and implement mechanisms to determine how much learning loss has occurred during the school closures. The second key message that we want to deliver is that assessments can be implemented even in low-resource contexts. Throughout the note, we make the case of, and we analyze different instances where assessments take place, whether in instances where countries have a lot of resources or have limited resources or have very limited resources. In all these instances, with enough capacity and enough support to teachers, assessments can happen. Especially in low context environments, we're thinking and we're trying to say and deliver a message about teacher professional development and how to support teachers' assessment literacy so they can implement classroom assessments throughout the school year. Related to this previous point, a clear message that we want to also emphasize in the note is the relevance of teachers and the central role they play into this. Teachers are a key player in the process of assessment, learning, and instruction. Any classroom or large-scale assessment initiative needs teachers to be involved in it, whether in the design, the administration, or the use of the results. All these activities are key, and without teachers, this is not possible. Therefore, ministries of education and national assessment agencies have to think about how to better communicate with teachers and make them engage and make them part of this process. And finally, one of the key messages that we want to deliver with this note is that we want to build back better. This includes more resilient national assessment systems in countries that can react to future shocks and interruptions to in-person education and instruction. Some countries and subnational divisions in low, middle, and high-income countries already have very resilient national assessment systems in place, which have been helping them to implement effective learning assessments as students are coming back to school. The note finishes with 6 country examples and 6 country cases that we want to bring. Each one of these examples gives a different flavor about the assessment process as the schools reopen. Some countries have been implementing classroom assessments. Some others have been implementing national large-scale assessments to monitor learning losses, whereas others had to face the difficult decision of whether they had to implement a national examination during this pandemic. All these different examples want to motivate policy discussions. And we are very fortunate today to have 3 experts from national assessment agencies today who will be sharing with us their country examples and what their countries have been doing in terms of learning assessments in this process of school reopening. Please allow me to introduce 3 panelists today. They are 3 experts from national assessment agencies that have deep understanding of the technical and practical aspects of learning assessments. They also understand the policy implications of their work and why it is relevant for fostering learning in the classroom. Today we have Dr. Daniel Rodriguez from Agencia de Calidad de la Educación de Chile. He will be talking to us about the use of remote and in-person diagnostic assessments in Chile. We have Dr. Assumpta Matei from Kenyan National Examinations Council. She will be talking about the assessment agenda and the use of classroom assessments in Kenya. We have Dr. Kyungsung Chang from Korea Institute of Curriculum and Evaluation. She will be talking to us about the assessment activities in Republic of Korea as part of the school reopening process. I want to thank all of them on behalf of the World Bank, UNESCO, and UNICEF for their time. And I'm really excited about hearing and getting to learn from them what their countries have been doing. So with no further delay, over to you, Dr. Rodriguez, for the case of Chile, please. Dr. Rodriguez, Daniel Rodriguez? Yes, perfect. We can see your slide.
Hello, good morning. Thank you. Thank everyone for participation in this interesting webinar. I would like to talk to you today about what Chile has been doing in regarding assessment in this pandemic. First, I would like to briefly tell you about our education system and the institutions that work on it. We have several but interrelated institutions that work together in order to assure quality in the Chilean educational system. And one of these institutions is the National Agency for Education Quality, which I work in and is in charge of the system assessment and also the support and guidance of schools in their improvement processes. Reopening schools in Chile has been very demanding, very difficult for our ministry, for the political authorities, because our system is very large. We have about 11,000 schools, and at the time only 1,000 have asked to reopen and initiate the process with the Ministry of Health in order to have all the documents and the protocols needed to retake presential school learning, and only 300, and these numbers are a bit old, maybe it's a bit better now, but it's around 400 schools have managed to reopen, especially in the higher levels, and level 11 and 12. So we have our system has been relatively slow in reopening after the long quarantines in the winter. The plan for reopening schools has been defined by the Ministry of Education, putting first safety, flexibility. That means that schools can take their own decisions in order to plan their return to presential classes. Equity, which help us to focus on the communities that need the most the school as a beacon for different social services. Learning recovery, we know, as Jaime Saavedra was saying, we know that the learning losses have been massive and have been unequal. So we are managing the reopening with a clear focus on reopening, on learning losses, on recovery, and emotional containment. That means that all the educational community has been deeply affected by the pandemic, maybe in their personal lives, but also as a nation, we've been severely hit by the pandemic. So we must expect that the communities will be heavily affected by the pandemic and cannot be expected to resume all their activities without being emotionally contained by many means. In that context, what has Chile been doing regarding the assessment during the pandemic? First, be flexible. One of the main characteristics of our system and many high-stakes accountability systems is that they are very rigid. They are based on strong legislation, and it's hard to adapt those legislation and those policies in a context so demanding and so different as the pandemic. So the first thing is to adapt to the new situation. The second one is to focus assessment not on accountability, but on support teachers and support one of the most difficult tasks at hand now, that is the assessment of learning during the pandemic. And I'm very happy to hear that Diego and other members of his team have developed this publication that confronts that issue directly. We know from worldwide evidence that if we must establish an assessment system in this context, it must be permanent and continuous and very focused on the communities that are lacking information, that are lacking knowledge about the learning losses. So at the same time, we must suspend or reduce the accountability, as it is not fair to keep a system that is based on accountability on schools on such a different context that is the pandemic. We chose to trust schools' capacity to adapt, not necessarily to mandate everything from the central level, but also to trust the schools in their different adaptations and protocols to confront the returning of the presential classes. And also try to use assessment at the national level to help the ministry design different policies for 2021. So I think what is the best concept to define what we've been doing is to look for a new equilibrium between support, guidance, and accountability in standardized testing and assessment. And with that idea in mind, we've been changing other things as platforms that allow paper-based and online testing, also mixed testing, because we know that the situation will be mixed, not only this year, the remaining of this year, but also next one. We looked for more flexible instruments that schools may use whenever they need them, not only as a one moment or one application window and very restrict conditions. We are looking to report results faster, ideally at the same moment as the tests are taken, in order to provide data directly to schools, not to the national level, but to schools at the same moment that they are taking the tests. We're expanding our formative assessment policies for internal use to almost every grade. That's a policy that is important to enforce, to give it more focus and more and a broader focus, really. And also focus on social-emotional skills. That has not been the focus of our system up at the time, but we're looking to assess other variables, other aspects of learning that we know that have been heavily affected by the pandemic and the confinement. So this table shows the difference between our traditional system, that is the first column, and the other two columns are two totally new systems or assessments that we have developed during the pandemic in order to adapt our system and make it more flexible. If I'm not going to read it cell by cell, but the main idea is that the traditional system is very, very rigid, is expected to be a large-scale assessment to reach all schools and all students, and it's part of a cycle that is expected by schools every year, and it's very rigid and very carefully designed, and also compulsory and high stakes. It means that schools may face consequences if they have low results. The second and the third column show the new system, the two new systems that we have been developing. The first one is still an exploratory study, which aims to replace the paper-based assessment with a computer-based assessment first in a sample, and then we hopefully think that we can manage to apply to the whole system. And the study or the policy that has raised more interest worldwide is the third column, the comprehensive diagnosis, which is an assessment in every level from 2nd grade to 10th grade, and it's voluntary and is school-based. Schools can choose whenever to use it in a very flexible manner. You can apply it online and paper-based, and is strongly based on social-emotional skills, and not only learning in math and reading, but strongly in social-emotional skills, which have been by far the most successful instrument of all. Sorry, may I also add that we have reached about 60% of the system in a voluntary basis, which is very high numbers. We didn't expect that. We expected it to be a relatively small project, maybe reach 1,000 schools, but we are very impressed that in a voluntary basis, we have reached more than half of the school system. And next year, the ministry is thinking making this assessment compulsory, not high stakes, it has no consequences, but compulsory for every school in order to have a clear diagnosis of learning and social-emotional skills before beginning the school year. So we're very, very proud and very happy that this socio-emotional and learning instrument has been so well received. This diagnosis, the one that I was talking just now, is developed as a cycle in the school, and it's based on the school. We are not expecting to have data for ourselves or for the central system. It's a very big difference between our traditional system. Our main goal is to give schools the data they need, not to give the central system data. We are also having some data for ourselves or for the system, but the main goal is for the schools to have data to make decisions. Sorry. So I think I probably already covered this. The system this assessment can be completely applied online. You can take the test at home or in the school, online or paper-based. If you take it online and you finish the test, the teachers and the principals receive immediately a report of the results at a classroom level and also as a school level in both math, reading, and these social-emotional skills. It's an immediate report. The platform is flexible. We are allowing also for students to take the test of other levels if the school sees it fit. And questionnaires are also available for data needed for socioeconomic and other purposes. We have also adapted our guidance toolbox for this new source of data and this new diagnosis via some online workshops, and also the creation of networks of schools that are in very different places of the country and maybe don't share many characteristics, but are together in their struggle to return to presential classes and to assess learning in their communities. And these have been very successful meetings and networks that have been created in order to make schools not feel so alone in their mission. We at the time we have around 200,000 students that have finished the instruments, which is a very large number for us. We're very happy to have reached that number, but we are around 6 or 7% of the whole enrolled students. So we are expecting to grow much more in our results. But at the time and up to this point, we have a very good feedback from the different communities that have used this instrument, both in paper-based basis or also online. So what we're thinking now and what is our main challenge is how to learn from this experience that has been heavily contextualized in the pandemic to create tools that endure after the pandemic is over. And we think this system of assessment that is much more school-based, that has reached a new equilibrium between consequences, high stakes, and guidance, and may endure after the crisis is over. And schools have been the main drivers of this change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. This has been a very interesting presentation. I have to say that I always put the Chilean CIMSE and the agency as an example of a strong national assessment system in Latin America. So it's interesting to see how to cope with the pandemic, you have transitioned from a large-scale assessment approach to a classroom assessment approach that considers socio-emotional first and foremost. Thank you very much. Okay, so next we're going to have Dr. Assumpta Matei. She leads the large-scale assessment initiatives in Kenya through the Kenya National Examinations Council. Dr. Matei. So Dr. Rodriguez, if you could stop sharing your screen, please.
Okay.
I think, and Dr. Matei, over to you. Dr. Assunta Matei has been participating in a lot of the global and country initiatives on large-scale assessments in Kenya. And she will be talking to us about the newest approach that they are following to respond to this pandemic by having learning assessments to know how students are returning to the schools. Dr. Matei, over to you.
Thank you. I just want to give a brief background of Kenya. I want to say that Kenya has been participating in national and regional learning assessments. And participation in this assessment actually dates back to 1995 when we participated in the first SACMEC study. And I want to say that in line with the global commitments for education, Kenya has established a national assessment system for monitoring learner achievement, which we call NASIMLA. And Kenya has designated a unit to assess or to conduct all sample-based national learning assessments, and of course to coordinate international and also regional assessments. The National Assessment Center, which I head at the Kenya National Examinations Council. And I have already said that Kenya has participated in SACMEC, in fact, the 4 SACMEC cycles since 1995. And we hope, and we have been in communication with the OECD, hoping that we'll be able to participate in the next PISA-D. I say PISA-D because of technological challenges. We may not allow us to do the online assessments for PISA. You all know that we have had challenges since the closure of schools in March 15th for Kenya, and our learners have been out of school, but of course learning amid a lot of technological challenges such as the internet connectivity. They have had classes and lessons through education TVs and other channels. But again, through the support of the GPE, Kenya initiated the emergency response plan. And one of the key interventions was to have the learning assessments once the schools reopen. But for this particular intervention, it was just done for the primary schools. That is primary 1, grade 1 to standard 8. I'm saying grade 1 to standard 8 because Kenya is running 2 different, let's say 2 parallel curriculums, one competence-based curriculum and also the objective-based curriculum, which of course it is variably known as 844 curriculum. And so we envisaged to conduct assessment once schools reopen. And I want to say that 2 of the classes have already reopened. That is grade 4, which is the competence-based curriculum class, and class 8, which is the examination class for primary. And of course, what you'd call the grade 12 or form 4 for the secondary school. But we are saying the purpose of these learning assessments are slightly different. There's a paradigm shift from the normal large-scale assessments that we conduct as grade 3, grade 6, and form 2. This one is actually like an action research where we want to assess learners' entry behavior after the long period of school closure. And we want to inform on possible learning gaps, as the previous speaker has said. Much as countries are trying to have learning through remote learning, of course, the face-to-face learning approach is not there. And most of the learners, most significantly from the remote areas and far-flung areas, and let's say vulnerable groups, have had challenges of internet connectivity. And because of the psychosocial challenges, we are bound to have learning loss. And that is one of the key concerns that these assessments wanted to address. and put interventions or suggest interventions to be put in place in order to address the learning gaps. And one of the key objectives of this learning assessment is to build our teachers' capacity to develop and administer valid and reliable, efficient school-based formative assessments through the standardized assessments that we are going to be offering. The scope of the assessments, I want to say that for the first time, we have had assessment, we are going to have assessment that are targeting the entire primary school population of learners, that is 10 million. The assessments are going to merit or to benefit 10 million, over 10 million learners. All primary schools, both public and private, are going to be involved. I'm saying for grade standard 8 and 4, they have already done the assessments. All learners in age-based, regular, and stage-based, the special needs education learners will also be assessed. And we are saying that grade 1 to 3 will be assessed in fundamental literacy and numeracy in line with the SDG 411. Grade 4 is already assessed. Grade 5 will be assessed in mathematics, languages, and science, of course, in line with the SDG 4 requirements. And grade 4 SNE pathway will also be assessed. I've said that class 8 has already been assessed in all the Kenya certificates of certificate of primary education subjects. Of course, this will give us a baseline upon which we can anchor interventions before they sit for their examinations in March. Of course, class 7 will also be assessed in all the KCP, in all the KCP subjects. How are we going to be administering the tests or the assessments? We are saying that although the assessments are standardized and external, they were administered at school level. They are going to be school-based. They are pen and paper. And for the first time, Kenya is assessing oral skills or listening and speaking for languages for early years. The Kenya National Examinations Council, through the National Assessment Center, developed and upgraded the existing assessment portal. The assessment tools were uploaded on the assessment portal. Schools were supported to print and administer the assessment tools, and teachers administered, and others will administer also and upload the assessment scores or performance outcomes onto the assessment portal. So we are saying that although the assessments are external, they are standardized, but they are going to be administered at school level. That shows the flexibility of the assessment, because we want to show that we want the teachers to give their own input in terms of the assessment. And of course, they'll give real-time feedback to the teacher, to the parents, and to the learner, and also to the teacher, so that to change to change the pedagogy or to adopt the appropriate pedagogy. Data analysis and reporting. We are saying that for the already administered assessments, they will be analyzed against the criteria or indicators as per the assessment frameworks that were developed by the teachers. And by this time then, through this, you'll be telling the teachers, or teachers will be able to show the learners that are attaining the minimum proficiency level in various subject domains. We want to disaggregate these achievement scores by subgroups such as gender, school types, and region, not for selection, not for comparison, but so that the schools and the regions can initiate specific, school-specific and region-specific interventions towards improving the achievement or the learning outcomes of these learners amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Reporting then, because of the flexibility of this assessment, reporting will be done at school level, where teachers will analyze their learner scores or performance outcomes. and to establish the learning gaps and institute school-specific interventions and subject-specific interventions. Teachers are expected to give timely feedback, as I have said, to parents and learners. And of course, at national level, the National Assessment Center will develop a national report to inform on the status of learning during the pandemic and post the pandemic, and initiate dialogues. I want to say that one of the key achievements of Kenya through the Kenya National Examination Council and of course, National Assessment Center, with the support of the GP and the World Bank, is the institutionalization of the county and national dialogues on quality education, where we disseminate the findings of our studies. And we envisage that the findings of these school-based assessments will be disseminated through national dialogues and county dialogues, so as to initiate dialogues and discourses that will be able to come up with the interventions that can be put in place, not only to mitigate the learning loss during this pandemic, but also to institute measures that can be put in place for resilience of our assessment systems and education systems during the times of pandemic and emergency. What are then the key achievements of Kenya in terms of assessment during this period of containment? I want to say that the assessment stood for grades 1 and standard 8. We developed 2 parallel forms. One will be administered at this time. One will be administered upon the opening of schools, and the other one will be uploaded later so that the schools can use it as part of classroom assessment. That way we'll be building the capacity of the teachers, one in assessment and in continuous, or making assessment as a continuous part of learning. I also reported that the learning assessment for grade 4 and standard 8 were administered from 26th to 30th October 2020 when the schools opened. I want to report that scoring has already been completed, and I'm saying that as at now, an estimated over 2 million learners have benefited from the assessment. Uploading of the scores actually is in progress, and I want to report that as at today, 80% of the scores for grade 8 had already been uploaded, and about 50% of the scores for grade 4 have already been uploaded as today, a few minutes before I started this meeting. We are hoping that by the end of this month, we will have at least close to 90% response as far as uploading of standard 8 scores are concerned, and of course, close to 70% uploading of the scores to pave way for data analysis and feedback so that we can initiate the necessary interventions as a country. I want to say that amid the COVID-19, the learning assessments have really impacted positively on the capacity of the teachers. One of the key strategies that Kenya and the Kenya National Examinations Council in particular, through the National Assessment Center, has adopted is using practicing teachers in the development of the assessment tools for the reopening strategy. The teachers were able to come up with very authentic tasks that will be used, and some of them have been used to assess the learning outcomes among the learners. Teachers have been able to learn the principles and practice of item construction. I want to say that in Kenya, we have had teachers who rely mostly on commercially sourced assessments. And Kenya has been training teachers every year so that to make sure that teachers do not keep on sourcing for these commercial assessments whose psychometric characteristic cannot be vouched for. So it is expected that this capacity building will have a positive impact on formative assessment at school level once the schools reopen. I also want to say that through the Global Partnership for Education and with support from the World Bank, Kenya He's implementing the school-based teacher support but through the Ministry of Education, where the teachers are supported, will be supported to improve on their pedagogy. And I want to say that Kenya has already developed a training manual for this kind of initiative. And we are saying that as part of the school-based teacher support, teachers will be trained and supported to come up with authentic tasks, which can help improve on classroom practices and assessment. And I want to say that teachers will also benchmark the assessments that were developed during this COVID-19 pandemic period in order to set and construct assessments that have the accurate or the correct psychometric properties. I want to say that teachers will also, I want to say that one of the challenges facing assessment in Kenya during this pandemic period is ICT technology. I want to say that a considerable percentage of our teachers have phobia for ICT. So assessment through ICT or online assessment has been a challenge. But I want to say that Kenya has tried very much to embrace assessment or online assessment. Teachers have integrated assessment as an integral part of remote learning. Online assessment have been going on, especially in private schools and some public schools. And the government, through the Kenya Institute of the Curriculum Development, has also been supporting learning and assessment through online platforms. I want to say that in majority of the schools, especially those in the rural areas, teachers have been scanning written tasks, authentic tasks and assignments, and sending to learners through parents or guardians through their phones or WhatsApp, other applications like WhatsApp and Facebook. So learning has really been a collaborative, learning and assessment has really been a collaborating effort between the teacher, the parent, and the guardian. What are some of the challenges? I'm saying that we have had some progress in terms of assessment, but we still have challenges or gaps that can be addressed. I want to say that uploading of scores for the classes that have already done the assessment has been very slow. Earlier on, I said that the assessments were finalized on 30th October. And up to now, we are still uploading the scores, partly due to poor network or internet connectivity in schools, especially those in far-flung areas, and also due to what I call the lack of technology, technological, digital literacy skills among some of the teachers. Analysis or data analysis and writing of the national report may be delayed due to the slow pace in uploading of this assessment. But I want to say that Kenya is putting every effort to ensure that the data will be uploaded by end of this month, so that by December we are at least writing or coming up with some short briefs to show the status of learning or the learning loss, so that we can institute mechanisms before these children start their examinations. We are saying that we just did the learning assessments for grade 1 to standard 8, but we have not developed the learning assessment for the secondary school, that is Form 1, or what we would call that for grade 8 to grade 12. We are saying that there is need to conduct similar learning assessments at secondary school level in order to inform of any learning loss and institute mechanism towards improvement. What are the next steps? I said earlier on that Kenya is committed to the provision of quality education through conducting large-scale learning assessments. And so the National Assessment Center will continue undertaking the sample-based assessments under the NAEA framework, which actually we are now reviewing to give regular feedback for continuous improvements of teaching and learning. The next cycle for the grade 3 assessment, sample-based assessment, is envisaged for 2021, which means we are going to give or to keep on giving feedback towards making our education system more resilient even during pandemic. We are envisaging to do a study of 10-year-olds under the Ending Learning Poverty Initiative in 2021, once this population of learners reopen school. So we are saying by March, by February, March, we are going to do a reading assessment, which we also want to widen the scope to numeracy because of the learning loss, so that we are continuously reporting on learning status. And we are in the process of undertaking the SACMEC 5 main study. We have already done the pilot, and we envisage to do the main study in 2021 once the schools reopen. These are some of the steps we want to make so as to ensure that we continuously report on learning during this period of emergency. I think that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matei. I think in the two presentations that we have just seen, it's so interesting how countries that were focused on doing, or agencies focused on doing large-scale assessments and national examinations have to readapt to this new reality and have to come up with using their best skills in learning assessment to come up with new products that can help to teachers, students, and parents. I want to continue the presentation now, introducing Dr. Kyungsung Chang from Korea's Institute of Curriculum and Evaluation, who is in charge of developing the national assessment in the country and oversee the national assessment practices in Korea. So Dr. Chang, over to you, and as you requested, I will be sharing your slides.
Please, thank you.
Can you just give me 1 second, because I need to find your slide, Korea. Okay. So, Dr. Chang, over to you.
I like to say that it is very difficult to keep awake because this is, the middle of the night. And anyway, I'll try. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure to share our experience about the assessment during and still going on. The next, please. I just try to focus on the questions of the webinar's concepts. So 2 questions. Next, please. So Korean the education system is we following the 2-semester system. So in March, the new school year start, and then this year, the government postponed the opening the school in March, and then the wait, but the situation became worse. So we postponed several times, and finally decide about early April, all the education system turn to the online education system. So we started the final year, 3rd year of the high school, then move on down to the middle school and then the primary. The reason why we start with the last year of the high school is because of the college entrance examination. So we try to make the students prepare the very high stake examination at the end of the year. That's why we introduce online education system for the final year of the high school. Next, please. And the reason I want to share this system is we believe the assessment, if you want to make assessment valid, it should align to the teaching and the learning in the classroom. Otherwise, it cannot be valid assessment it should be aligned to the curriculum and teaching and learning assessment. That's why I want to share this system. So I highlighted the part related to the assessment. So if you're looking at the red ones, you can see what kind of assessment students and teachers have. So, okay, next please. And we have different types of online classes. Students can have the real-time interactive classes. So it's done by real time. And other type is, we have two types, content-oriented classes. It's usually the teachers transmit the knowledge to students. It's one way, and the students do some kind of activities, or students are given some kind of activities or task to be completed after the class. So assessment types of assessment is depending on what types of online classes students have. So usually this real-time interactive classes, students have some kind of real-time feedback, and so we can call the performance-based assessment. And lecture type, or if the students do some kind of activities or tasks, teachers provide some kind of feedback, and students also can be involved in some kind of a peer assessment. So they assess their colleagues' activities or assignments. Next, please. And when schools open, teachers can use the data from the assessment they have done during the online classes. So then they can use teacher observation information, and I called it the performance assessment. Also, they can use the feedback on the task or activities students done, and other data from the LMS learning management system, like how much each students take part in the activities or quizzes, or the outcomes of the assignment. Next, please. The other types of data the teachers can use to measure the students' learning losses is based on the paper-based assessment. When the school opened, to complement the assessment result from the online classes, the school can also have the formal test, which is the paper and pencil test, usually composed of the multiple choices or the short answer questions. So the teachers can use the paper and pencil test result as well as the online class assessment result, so they can make complementations to make decisions about students' learning losses. Then they can take actions to make up the learning losses. Next, please. And next question is, we're looking at the kind of, the national levels, the monitoring systems to measure learning losses and how to use the evidence to make decisions. Next, please. I can say we have two ways of doing that. Firstly, we can use the result of the National Student Assessment System. We call NAEA. It's done national level, and it has been done since 1998 for quality education and to making educational policies. Before the COVID-19, this assessment usually take place in June every year, but this year, tomorrow, tomorrow the students will take this test due to the COVID-19. And okay, yes, please. And we need to understand the system of this national level test. We use the outcomes of this assessment test when we revise the curriculum, and also when we design some kind of teacher support actions. We use this result of this test. Next, please. And in this system, we have 4 levels: advanced and proficiency level, and basic and below basic. So we invest a lot of actions to improve the students' learning on the basic. Next, please. Okay, so the government is expected the result of this test, which will take place tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. Tomorrow is for the middle school, and the day after tomorrow is the high school. So we are going to analyze the result, students, the outcomes of this test, and then we'll come to the conclusions about the learning losses during the pandemic. And also the government will make some decisions how to support particularly the students below and under below levels. Next, please. The other way of monitoring students' learning losses is to using the basic academic ability diagnosis and remediation systems, which we have 17 local office education. All the 17 local office education have this system. So every students and teachers can use this system for free. And usually takes place August to September. So during this period, students get logged in this system and take this test, and then automatically the students get the result, and the test result is used by teachers to design some their instructions and the remediation programs. Next, please. And this is one example of the one local office education, the diagnosis and remediation systems. So it is usually take place in online, and the students has got, they are given the ID and the password, and they log in and they choose the test, and then automatically they got the result. So also in this test, we have 4 same systems, the advanced, proficient, and basic and below basic. Next, please. And I'm going to show you how to use these findings to support teaching and learning to make up the learning losses. Next, please. Okay, we use the result of this test to revise the curriculum. So the government is planning to revise the national curriculum to 2022. So we are going to use and consider and the result of the national assessment is the result to adjust to the learning standard and the teaching and learning and the assessment system. Then also the local office education use this data when they design the loss of remediation programs. And also this data is used by parents to support their children. And also the local communities use this data, particularly to provide some remediation programs, children from the poor and also the disadvantaged students. Next, please. Okay, these are some directions how the government's implementing the result of this data. But I want to, you can read, but I want to share one actions the government is planning now is Korean government is planning to introduce online national assessment systems because as I mentioned earlier, NAEA, National Assessment System, has been implemented since 1998. It's a long time, but this year is very unusual. But they want to develop some kind of online national assessment system so that the students and teachers can use year-round, anytime they want to measure the learning losses or design their instructions to adjust to the students' level. So not one-off activities that take place in June or ever, because we don't know. So we might have some, other diseases, crisis like COVID. So, but the government want to support students and teachers, continue their learning. So that's why the government plan to develop the online learning assessment. But we have lots of challenges, like how to measure socio-emotional skills or students' competencies using the online systems, and how to use the result just using the online system to improve the learning and teaching. So we have many challenges. And another challenge is in Korea, to the college entrance examination is very competitive. Everybody wants to go to the good universities, so it's very highly competitive. So we want to introduce some kind of the assessment system to support learning, not just to prepare the college entrance examination. So we have that kind of challenges to improve, but basic assumption for developing is we want to support students and teachers continue their educations even in the crisis. That's why they want to develop the year-round assessment systems. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Chang, thank you very much, and double thank you to you, because I know it's quite late in Korea, and you still made the time for being here with us and letting us know and share with us what Korea is doing as part of this assessment and school reopening. Thank you very much, Dr. Chang, Dr. Matei, Dr. Rodriguez. Please allow me now to introduce Manuel Cardoso, who will be leading the discussion and Q&A session. Manuel is an education specialist at UNICEF, where, among many other activities, because we run into each other all the time in different projects, he actively works on learning assessments with countries and international development partners. So Manuel, I cannot see the screen right now because I'm sharing it, but over to you.
Thank you, Diego, and thank you to all the presenters. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Thank you to the presenters from Chile, Kenya, and Korea for sharing their experiences. Their experiences are, I think, extremely valuable for all of us to learn about how to face this global crisis that we're faced with right now. And we've been, with my colleague Aislinn Falconer, and I have been collecting some of the questions that the audience has posed, and we have some questions and comments of our own that we would like to share now. I think one first comment that comes to my mind is how this crisis has forced us to rethink some of the choices we've made in the past about assessment. I think it's very interesting how many of the systems that we've been looking at had a strong high stakes component, and how this has allowed us to rethink some of these that focus on a high stakes component, for instance. And so I'd like to emphasize that point, how we used to look at some types of assessment, most of all, for instance, high stakes, and now how this crisis has brought a welcome focus, I would say, on formative assessment, on classroom assessment, on giving more instruments to teachers to deal with learning issues within the classroom. I think this is a very important lesson that we have maybe learned from this crisis. And one of my questions for all of the presenters would be, well, when this crisis is over, what will we learn? What lessons will we take for so-called normal times, right? How will assessment systems become better as a result of being faced with this crisis? So that's one of the first questions that maybe we can address during the Q&A period. And I have a couple of other questions also for all the countries, and then I will share some specific questions for each country. One of the big issues that we've noticed with this crisis, and actually with probably all crises, is how they deepen existing inequities. Inequities become much more serious during crisis. And so the question is, how can assessment help us reveal those inequities and in order to address them through policy and through instruction? And another question is related to that is, then how are teachers going to deal with those inequities? We know that this crisis, because so much learning has happened remotely during this crisis, that the importance of households and inequities in households has become even more crucial to children's learning. So in households with fewer access, with less access to internet, with fewer devices, with lower parental educational attainment, there will be lower learning. And when children come together into the classroom, the heterogeneity that always exists in classrooms in terms of learning will have increased tremendously. And assessment can play a part in revealing those inequities, and in some cases, like informative assessment, not only revealing those inequities, but addressing them to some extent. So one of the questions is, how are you going to help countries and teachers deal with those inequities sometimes within the classroom? One of the things that UNICEF is doing is it's partnering with the JPAL, the JPAL network, the I can never remember the name of the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab. Some of their economists won the Nobel Prize last year, and they are working with randomized controlled trials, looking at what works in education. And one of the things that they've noticed that works in several different settings is what they call teaching at the right level, which is something that Pratham developed. So one of the big challenges now will be, well, how do we address those inequities? So do we keep teaching everybody the same just because they happen to be in the same classroom and in the same grade, when they will bring all these differences in learning from their classrooms? So we're partnering with them and with Pratham to support countries to do some of this work according to the teaching at the right level methodology. But there will be other ways of doing this, and it would be interesting to hear from countries about how you are doing this. Also, well, the question, for instance, there was a question from Margaret Clark about the digital divide that was specifically directed at Korea, but I think this is a question that we can all address, that it's probably very relevant in Chile and Kenya as well. And my last question for the whole group is, when this crisis is over, what should countries do to prepare for the next one, right? Because we need to be ready for the next crisis. And then I have a couple of questions specifically for each of the presenters. I think it's very interesting, for instance, what Daniel was saying. Chile has a tradition of a very well-developed assessment system, like Diego said, particularly focused on high-stakes testing, but also with testing that is low stakes for students, but can be high stakes for teachers and for schools. So how has this crisis given Chile an opportunity to do more in other areas like formative assessment, and also on other skills like social emotional skills? In particular, on social emotional skills, there's a huge interest in Latin America right now about in social emotional skills. Particularly ERCE, the regional assessment, has just developed an instrument that focuses on empathy and self-management in 6th grade, I believe. So I would like to ask Daniel, which particular social emotional skills have you been focusing on in Chile? And you said something, Daniel, very interesting about external assessment for internal use. And I was wondering if you were talking there about the comprehensive learning assessment in particular, or you have other examples. So I would have lots of other questions, but I will quickly move on to something very interesting that Assumpta said about a paradigm shift to an action research approach. I would like to hear more from Assumpta about what she meant by that. And also, Kenya is a very linguistically diverse country where English, the former colonial language, Kiswahili, the lingua franca, and a number of mother tongues all play a role in schooling. How does the assessment component right now address the issue and the richness of linguistic diversity that Kenya has? And last but not least, for Dr. Chang from Korea, the Republic of Korea is a country with high levels of education and high connectivity and access to technology, some of which is developed in Korea itself. So Korea had an enviable education baseline before the crisis. But what were the challenges that the crisis brought, and how did assessment play a part in addressing those challenges? And in particular, there was this question from Margaret Clark about, is there a digital divide even in a rich country like Korea? And you said something very important about tailored programs that consider individual student needs. So I'm going to stop there because I asked a lot of questions, and maybe we can start with Daniel, who was the first to present.
Thank you for all the questions. I'll try to answer them all in the best way. I think I'll start with what have we learned as an assessment system for the future, and I think that links to two of your questions. How are we going to prepare for the next crisis, and what is going to remain after this crisis is over? And I think the answer is twofold. One is more decision making and more power to the school level or the district level. It differs in different countries, but the district level or the school level, in order to take decisions about assessment and also grading, and also more technical, more administrative things related to assessment. That is needed, because a very centralized system, although Chile is not a very centralized system, but still, if the decision making is too centralized, it doesn't work in a crisis, especially in a crisis that is so that moves so fast, changes dramatically from one week to the other. And it's very difficult to get a grasp of what is happening in each territory from the central from the central government. And I said it's twofold. The other fold is flexibility, is to design for the crisis, to design systems that are allowed to work in more demanding contexts. Or all our policies in Chile were based on two premises. Is one, the schools are working, two, the children are inside the school. Those two basically like working conditions disappeared from one day to the other. So we had to learn to work with our basic hypothesis. So I think now we have to design all our policies thinking, and that's what we're doing in Chile in early childhood education. We're thinking about how can we design a system that works, that can be resilient, even if the most basic premises are not working, and if everything is not working. So, for instance, in early childhood education, we are now developing tools for the families to work with very small children. It's not that we're thinking to replace the school. That would be absolutely out of scope. What we are thinking is that we must design systems that are resilient to crises that we didn't expect it to happen. And one of those crises may be long school closures. Regarding the high stakes and the opportunities to work with different paradigms, because I think this crisis is going to in a way quicker, not so rigid and more flexible, and adapted to the context. And also, we will have to provide much more than just external assessment in order to really help schools. I mean, it's something that in the literature and in other experiences is well known, that only testing is not going to help by itself. And we know that, and we've been working on that for a long time. But this has forced us to, as I tried to explain in my presentation, to design a new equilibrium, a new way to deal with this thing, with the necessity of taxpayers to know what is happening in schools, but at the same time to trust schools to solve their own problems with support.
Gracias, Daniel.
I hope I talked too much.
That's a great point to finish on, the importance of trusting schools. Thank you so much, Daniel. Let's move on to Assumpta. Assumpta, I would like you, if we're running a little short on time, so among the questions that I posed to you, maybe you can focus on the one when you talked about a paradigm shift to an action research approach. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I'm very intrigued by that idea.
Thank you. I'll just make just a comment on it. I want to say that we can use that word sparingly, loosely. It is action research because it's the first time that Kenya was administering these assessments, national learning assessments, in time of emergency like this. So we wanted to see the effect of remote learning. Yes, we have had remote learning, but of course, because of lack of internet access and these issues of equity in terms of provision for internet in some of the far-flung areas, we may not have had effective learning. So we are saying it is an action research because we want to see the effect of this COVID-19 closure and to see whether there's any learning loss. But I want to say that action research, I'm saying it should be the way to go, so that we keep on addressing emerging issues as they come, and we give interventions towards, dealing with those challenges. Thank you. But I'm saying I use the word loosely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it's perfect. Okay. I think it encapsulates this notion of being ready to respond to changing circumstances that we're facing right now. And for Dr. Chang, I'm sorry, I'm calling you Dr. Chang because I'm not sure I can pronounce your first name. I apologize for that. One of the important questions was you talked about, sorry, Margaret Clark asked the question about the digital divide in Korea. Is there a digital divide in Korea, even a rich country, a highly educated country like Korea? Is that an issue still? I'm afraid you're muted, Dr. Chang.
Dr. Chang, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Digital divide is not the problem, I think, because the government provide, or the private companies provide support to the digital devices to improve the connectivity. But we have other challenges. I think Manuel, you raised the very difficult questions, like we are start to research, because the COVID-19 has left lots of questions, issues to be researched. So I will share when we get the result. Anyway, some of the questions you raised, but I want to raise some questions. We have some challenges to bridge the gaps between the curriculum and the assessment. The curriculum is based on how to improve the students' social emotional skills and the competencies for the future, but the test is to measure how much knowledge students have. Still, lots of questions and tests is heavily rely on the choose the best answers out of the 5 things like that. So we have huge gaps to be bridged between curriculum and assessment. Okay. And that's one of the issues. And then COVID-19 broke. Then the gap is has widened than before, much wider than before. So we have a long way to go. And another challenge is the trust to the students, teachers. How do you say that the assessment? So that's why when most schools want to supplement from the data from the paper and pencil test. Why? Because they cannot trust the teachers, the scores or the result the teachers give to their children's. They want to have some kind of tangible result and reliable test, like multiple choices. It's very clear and reliable. So we are trying to balance and reliability and the validity. So it's another issue of the trust. And in December we have a very, very high stake test we call college entrance examination, and the government is very concerned about the students' positive, but the parents, most parents said we want offline test because they cannot trust the mark or result they are given at schools. So the government is struggling between how to keep students safe, and also the satisfied parents, stakeholders request. So we are just trying to balancing and reliability and validity. Okay, that's the challenges we have to figure out in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chang. On the chat box, I shared a blog that UNICEF wrote at the beginning of the pandemic that uses mixed data, the multiple indicator cluster survey data, which is a household survey, to look at the limits to the ability to learn remotely because of the disparities in access to connectivity and so on. And also the relationship of that to learning. And I need to thank Assumpta particularly because the Kenya team helped us produce the Kenya government helped us produce the stories that we used in that assessment, in the foundational learning skills assessment that is part of MIX. We are very grateful to you. And I also mentioned there the name of the initiative that we're starting with UNICEF, JPAL, and Pratham on teaching at the right level, in case you're interested, and in case your country wants to reach out to the UNICEF country office to find out whether you are part of that initiative or whether you would like to become part of that initiative. And we're collaborating with the bank in a number of initiatives that we are very proud of being part of. Thank you, Diego. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thank you very much to all our panelists. Just before we close this session, I want to let you know that we also posted on the chat the resources available, the guidance note, and a blog related to this webinar. And I want to, so you can look at in the chat, and you will see the resources in the links in there. And I want to just finish this session today inviting Dr. Savita Will, the Director of Future of Learning and Innovation at UNESCO, to give us some closing remarks about the event. And I want to thank all the panelists today. I think I learned a lot from the three of you, and I think this is also opens the door for shared South-South collaborations between the different panelists. I think a lot of people are interested in social-emotional development. A lot of people are interested in learning how to adapt assessments and create assessments and follow the roles that the three countries that you're representing are doing. And please, let's keep this conversation going, and let's keep engaging other countries in these shared experiences with Korea, with Chile, and with Kenya. Thank you very much. So Sobi, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Diego. We're really coming to the close, so I'll just take a minute. But we have seen how critical learning assessment is in the juncture that we're in, this prolonged educational disruption, and there's uncertainty also on how long this will continue. So the importance of learning assessment, really to understand the magnitude of learning loss, the social distribution of learning loss, and how best to address that. As we know, the longer we will have this disruption, the more learning loss, the more likelihood of disengagement of students and of dropout. And I think we heard through the three presentations at least a shift in focus, increased attention, moving away at least partially from more rigid, large-scale assessments for the purposes of accountability, of system strengthening, data that feeds the national educational authorities, to more school-based, classroom-based, formative, more flexible, intending to support teachers and beyond teachers, parents and communities. So if not a paradigm shift, at least some increased attention to more localized school-based, classroom-based, and formative types of assessments. And the last point, this is, and I think Manuel mentioned that earlier, there is an opportunity. We didn't have the time in the question and answers, but this disruption has forced on us innovation and transformation. It comes at a cost, but it is an opportunity to be rethinking assessment, to be rethinking curriculum, to be rethinking the role of technologies, to be rethinking teaching and learning. So there was a good question from Manuel that we didn't quite get to, is how much of this will we keep and take forward when things are, let's say, more stable, if not back to normal. So I don't want to take more time, just to thank the three panelists for sharing their experiences, and to all the participants. The webinar and the presentations will be available online on the UNESCO website for these joint webinars. So thank you all. Thank you for the three panelists, Daniel Rodriguez, Assumpta Matea, and then Dr. Chang. and to all the participants. And just to say that in the series of our joint UNESCO-UNICEF-World Bank webinars, the next will be, I believe, on the 16th of December on hybrid learning. So you are more than welcome to take part and to share that with also with your colleagues. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.